Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Henna Hundal, and today we're bringing you an interview with the President of Pakistan, His Excellency Dr. Arif Alvi. President Alvi, a dentist by training, shifted toward politics early in his career and is now leading Pakistan alongside Prime Minister Imran Khan during a time of critical geopolitical, economic, and COVID-19 challenges. This interview will elicit President Alvi's opinions on these issues, including his views on the recent developments in Afghanistan and what he believes the future of US-Pakistan diplomatic relations should look like. During this interview, I'll be joined by guest hosts Geser Nawab and Giovanna Mingarelli, who will ask the president for his perspectives on youth and technology-focused policies. As always, the opinions conveyed in this broadcast belong to our guest. President Alvi joins us now.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to now bring in Giovanna Mingarelli into the conversation. Giovanna is a Canadian technology entrepreneur who serves on the advisory board of Women in Cloud, which is a UN women-supported organization that is empowering women-led STEM companies. Giovanna is going to ask you a few questions now about women in technology in Pakistan.
Thank you, Henna, and hello, Mr. President. You've pioneered the use of technology for greater electoral progress during your political career, where you introduced social media platforms to politics in Pakistan. You were, for example, instrumental in holding inter-party elections in 2012 and 2013 that enabled millions of party members to digitally participate in the electoral process. One of your projects was enabling the digital identification of voters and voting of overseas Pakistanis. Can you please tell us more about that and how you believe digital identification will support Pakistan's growth plans?
I think there is unanimity in the world that digitization of an economy increases our GDP, any GDP by 1 or 2%, number one. Number two, involvement of women in the productive cycle in the economy further increases our gross domestic product and our gross national product. Having said that, we need to empower our women. One of the things that is through education. The other is, if they're less educated, to provide some loans for small situations like for small shops or for able to stitch garments or fashion houses of some sort, etc. to do that. The third thing is that in Pakistan, sometimes woman inheritance becomes an issue. So the religion of Islam has ensured that woman inheritance is there since 1400 years. It's the cultures of different countries. In fact, Europe did not come into woman inheritance recognizing that until the early 20th century. But Islam had that since 1400 years ago. So therefore, we had the law, but not being implemented because of cultural traditions that woman is asked to gift it to her brother, etc. So in 2020 we enacted the Woman Property Rights Law. So that ensures inheritance. Number two, it also ensures the fact that if somebody is an undue usurper of her property or sitting on that property, it creates shortcuts as far as women are concerned to ease that situation. The third issue which you mentioned, which actually your main issue which you questioned about, is the possibility of electronic voting, both inside Pakistan and outside Pakistan. Let me give you some idea. When I pushed this issue, and I've been pushing this issue in the courts of law in the parliament since 2010, and my case came to hearing in the Supreme Court in 2018, and in the Supreme Court, somebody mentioned the fact that internet voting can be hacked, and I said yes, it can be hacked. Similar to the fact that people take planes and the plane can crash, but what are the percentage chances of hacking? And I took out my phone and told the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and asked him, do you have any idea of the amount of transactions that take place digitally in the world today? And that was 2018. And he said, maybe a few $1 billion. And I said, no, $5 trillion are moved on digital platforms throughout the world in a day. So I've been trying to convince the opposition and move the people of Pakistan towards the ability of digital voting. The digital voting requires 3 or 4 steps. Number one, the fact that a person has some digital ability to do it. For example, ability does not mean his knowledge or his education, but the fact that he has a smartphone. Because of lack of smartphone, we cannot deprive the rest of those who have a smartphone. Number one, that was a discussion which took place. Number two is that some agency should be able to make sure that I'm the person who has this smartphone and this is my identity. That is easily done in Pakistan today because NADRA has information and the banks call somebody who calls the bank that I want to move my funds from here to there. The bank asks him specific questions regarding his family or his broader family or etc., which not everybody would know. For example, nobody would know about my cousins, names of my cousins. So those questions are asked and the person is put through in digital banking. So the same thing we want to have in internet voting. Third is the ability to the vote not to be traceable. So there can be algorithmic mixing of the votes, but the ability to audit that also is possible, that the keys to this algorithmic mixing can be given to 3 or 4 people, maybe the Supreme Court, Chief Justice of Pakistan, and maybe to the Chief Election Commissioner, that when all the 2 keys are put in, only then this can be unraveled for an audit, which will not expose people's votes, but will at least expose it for the audit. So I think the software package needs to be developed, and in fact, but people in Pakistan need to be convinced that this will not lead to any hacking. And right now, for electronic voting, I have figures, for example, very important figures. For example, in Philippines, when electronic voting machines were used, when they were not used, there was 35% trust in the voting system. More than 100 people died. Presiding officers died in 2007. And there were more than 1,000 petitions. So I will trace this to the next election. Then the first election they had on electronic voting and technology in voting, the confidence went up from 35% to 70%. There were only 2 people killed. And the election petitions from 1,000 plus came down to 45 or 49. By the 3rd or 4th election, the confidence in the election process went to 89%. Nobody was killed, and only 11 petitions came up. So this is a public situation where we have to convince the people of Pakistan that this is a tried and tested situation. People say, why didn't the Western countries adopt that? Because they have securer systems. Traditionally, they have been more democratic. So it's very difficult to usurp those systems. But in fact, Mr. Trump challenged that system also. So the US will also have to go to some kind of internet voting or technology in the voting process.
Thank you so much, Mr. President.